And to get more on this, let's cross now live to Senior Research Fellow at the Global Policy Institute, George Samueli, joining me right now live. George, I'm glad to have you join me now. So we see, thank you. So we see the streets of Budapest filled with thousands of people showing their support for the government and Orban. What is your impression of this rally? What are the people trying to convey in your view?
Well, today was, of course, March the 15th, which is, of course, a very important national holiday in Hungary. It celebrates the Hungarian uprising against the Habsburg rule in 1848. It was, of course, eventually crushed. But nonetheless, it's a celebration of Hungarian aspiration for freedom. And today, there were, of course, two rallies. There was, of course, this rally, the peace rally of Viktor Orban, but there was another rally held by the leader of the Hungarian opposition, the Tisza party, by Péter Magyar, and they had two very different messages. Orban was insisting upon Hungarian freedom, Hungarian sovereignty, Hungarian aspiration of, being energy independent. And there was the rally led by Magyar, which insisted that somehow Hungary had moved away from the European NATO EU path and was promising that after that, should he win, Magyar should win, Hungary will return into the Brussels fold. And of course, what Magyar is doing in this election, he's doing a tried and true EU tactic, and they've done it in election after election after election, in Romania, in Moldova, in Georgia, which is to insist that somehow Russia is interfering, and that it's Russia, 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 and that somehow Hungary has to express its anti-Russian feelings by turfing out Viktor Orban.
All right, now, this march comes as Hungary is preparing for the upcoming elections in April. But just judging from what we see today, what do you make of Prime Minister Viktor Orban's chances?
Well, it's hard to know because the polls that are published show the Tisza ahead. And however, one shouldn't rely too much on the polls because when you actually examine the polls, you find that the polls which have the opposition, the Tisza, ahead, tend to be pushed by liberal media outlets. If you look at the polls published by polling organizations that are closer to the government, they have Fidesz ahead. But there happen to be actually more polls published by the liberal media outlets than there are polls published by government outlets. So that's why the weight of the polls tend to favor Tisza. So one shouldn't just simply buy into the narrative pushed by Politico, The Guardian, and the general liberal media ecosphere that somehow Orban is destined for defeat. We've seen this story before. Orban was behind in the polls in 2022, so one shouldn't just simply assume that Orban is bound to lose this election.
Now, why do you think Viktor Orban has such support at home, especially when we see that he is now very popular among EU officials and member states?
Well, Hungary has, under Orban, been absolutely firmly identified with two policies that generally are very popular among Hungarians. First of all, Hungary has completely stopped all migration into Hungary. That was Orban's most famous move in 2015. When Europe was inundated with migrants from the Middle East, Orban said, no, absolutely not. No one's coming to Hungary. This is very popular in Hungary. Even people who detest Orban and who intend to vote against him will still say, well, thank God he saved us from mass migration. So that's one thing. The second thing is that he has kept Hungary out of the war. And right from the beginning, from 2022 on, he said, Hungary will play no part in this war. We will neither provide Ukraine with any weapons, nor will we allow our country to be a transit route for weapons to Ukraine. And he has stuck to his guns since 2022, and he has also pushed for Ukraine to be kept out of the EU. So, and no one in Hungary wants Ukraine in the EU, and no one wants Hungary to be sucked into this war. So both of these policies, which is anathema to Brussels, are actually very popular in Hungary. So whatever problems people have with Orban, which usually have something to do with the economy, those policies, the ones most closely associated with Orban, are actually very popular in Hungary.
All right. Now, in previous weeks, Prime Minister Viktor Orban did not mince words when it came to Vladimir Zelensky, accusing him of attempting to meddle in Hungary's internal affairs, specifically in its elections. But how do you feel he has handled this situation with Zelensky specifically?
Well, again, I don't think Zelensky is terribly popular in Hungary. And in particular, this most recent actions on Zelensky's part, namely refusal to repair the Druzhba oil pipeline, are not at all looked favorably upon among Hungarians, because essentially Hungary is not getting oil. This is oil that Hungary had paid for, and Zelensky is holding up the repair of the Druzhba pipeline. So when Hungary has insisted on going to Ukraine and inspecting the pipeline to see how much damage there really is, Zelensky said no. Even when the EU stepped in and said, we'd like to come to Ukraine and inspect the Druzhba pipeline, Zelensky said no. So it's very reasonable to assume that the Druzhba pipeline could be repaired very easily and the oil could come to Hungary. But of course, Zelensky is doing this in order to raise energy prices in Hungary and therefore increase Orban's unpopularity and Zelensky hopes ensure his defeat in the election. So it's obviously interference in the Hungarian election process.
All right. Now, one of the things that the Hungarian people pointed out at today's rally is that they do not intend to fight Zelensky's wars or send their children to die in Ukraine. Why is this sentiment so strong in Hungary? Can you break this down for us?
Well, and this is a point that Orban has brought up again and again. There were two world wars in the 20th centuries. Hungary, which really didn't want either world war, got absolutely clobbered because Hungary is right in the center of Europe. And when there is a war between East and West, and both world wars were basically clashes between East and West, Hungary, which is in the middle, gets thumped. And Hungary probably suffered more as a result of the wars than any other country in Europe. Particularly in World War I, Hungary lost 2/3 of its territory. A third of its population ended up living outside of Hungary. So when Orban says we need to stay out of this war, because if there is a war between East and West, a third world war between East and West, we're going to get absolutely hammered, and we might even lose our state. Since given the past record. So that's why Hungarians, really, really do not want to get involved in this war.
All right. We have to leave you here now. George Samueli, Senior Research Fellow at Global Policy. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.